When I hear this gospel, I often think if Jesus were singing a hit tune to this lady, it would be the song from the Eagles, Lion Eyes. Especially that line in there that says, "Ain't it funny how your new life didn't change things? You're still the same old girl you used to be." After five husbands, the lady really hasn't changed all that much. So Jesus invites her to address the mess that she's made of her life. Just as for us, Lent is an invitation for the rest of us to address the mess, big or small, that we've made in our own lives. And we make messes of our finances, of our marriages, of our careers, our schooling, and of our relationships. And that's the arena that usually, particularly our relationships, leave the most scars. And as I said to you last week, every mess comes with a set of options that will help you to make the mess even messier. And you have to be careful to avoid them. And so when we make a mess, we have the choice to tell a story, make up a story, tell a lie, say I'm sorry one more time, take out another loan after we made a financial mess. So we have to be careful and realize that we can make the mess even messier. In the case of this lady in the gospel, she kept searching for another marriage to clean up the mess of the last one. And anyone who has been divorced and remarried will tell you that that strategy never works. You don't clean up spilled milk with more spilled milk. Now, I know sometimes the mess in our lives is helped along by the choices other people make or the circumstances that are often beyond our control. But we still have the power to respond and not react. We still retain the right to make decisions and choices to not make things even worse. In the case of the woman at the well, she was operating on what I call the right person myth. If the right person comes along, my life will be so much better. Now, that's not to say that there's not a right person for you. All long-term marriages show that that is often the case. But when we look to another person, another relationship to fix us, to make us better, it just never happens. Why? Because we have to address the mess inside ourselves first. In the case of this woman, she found 5 of the right persons, and none of them were able to fix her. By the time she got to number 6, she just gave up trying, and she just moved in with the guy. And she decided she would live with the mess for good, until her encounter with Jesus. And Jesus, as we hear, gets right to the point. You keep drinking from the same well, and yet you're still thirsty. Doesn't that tell you something? And Jesus hit the sore spot in her life. And so often she did what we often do when someone gets near that sore spot. She obfuscates, she deflects, and she just misdirects the conversation. First, it's about water, but she knows Jesus really isn't talking about this water. Then she does what most people do. She tries to start an argument about religion. Well, you Jews say that Jerusalem is the place, Samaritans say this. It's all rather cynical, as if to say there's no way to know what's right, so really, what's the point, Jesus? Now, we don't know if the woman was equally sinned against by her husbands as she was sinning, but Jesus tries to get her to see that how she responds can make all the difference. Still, in any event, she knew her life was a mess, and she knew that Jesus knew it was a mess. But she finally realizes that her quick fixes to addressing the mess in her life were only creating a bigger mess. And once she realizes that, she is ready to find a solution. And the solution is faith. Faith in something bigger than ourselves, bigger than our fears, bigger than our plans for the future, and even bigger than our own mess or our own sins. By the end of the conversation, the woman, as we say, walked right into the trap, sort of like a soccer player kicking the ball into his own goal, not realizing the goalkeeper wasn't there. Or if you've ever dealt with someone who you suspected had a drinking problem and they insist they absolutely don't, you say, well, just fine. Well, then just try not to drink for 30 days. If you have a real problem, if you don't have a problem, it won't be a problem. Of course, if they have a problem, they won't be able to do that. So the woman says, okay, look, when the Messiah comes, he'll straighten the whole thing out, so let's just leave it there. And then bingo, Jesus says, I am he. And where does she go from there? I mean, she's really at a turning point. Either accept the life-giving water or continue to thirst indefinitely. Let me add here, too, that the woman was probably used and abused by men. Men have a real responsibility, I'm sure, in her story. But let me ask you, especially as men, do you want to be somebody's regret? Do you want to be the person in someone else's story that they tell with regret, with shame, with embarrassment? Or do you want to be the person someone else says of, he was great, really wonderful, but it just didn't work out between us? When your name comes up, when somebody else is telling their story, really what do you want them to say about your part in the story? You have to think about that, otherwise there will be parts of your life story that you're ashamed to tell. And today what passes for dating isn't really dating at all. Maybe dating is just an old-fashioned word. But if the first date doesn't end in sex, well then it seems to be a waste. What I say to men is that self-control is powerful. Refusing to use another for your own selfish purposes is powerful. Kindness is powerful. So do to women what you would want them to do to your mother, your sister, your niece, your goddaughter. And ladies, you're not commodities. You know, commodities are bought and sold, traded, and sometimes eventually discarded. Maybe this culture has made you feel a bit like a commodity. The woman in the gospel clearly felt like a commodity. She was even willing to talk with a strange man in search of living water. But Jesus was probably the only man in her life that told her she was not a commodity. And he didn't want her to feel like one. Rather, she was someone who had extreme value and worth. Here was a Jewish rabbi reaching out to a Samaritan woman, and a woman with a past, and he treated her with great dignity, not scorn or judgment, but concern and kindness. And she finally realized her worth, and she would not allow herself to be mistreated any longer. So much so that she goes back to her town, newly invigorated, with her dignity restored, and is unafraid to tell the townspeople what had happened. And amazingly, seeing the change in her, the people give Jesus hospitality for 2 days, something that was just not done between Samaritans and Jews. And so Jesus here meets a good Samaritan, but of course that's another story. And so as we move through this Lent and attempt to address whatever is messed up in our lives, big or small, remember, don't reach for the quick fix. You know, husband number 1 didn't work so well, so I'll try number 2, 3, and 4, and 5, however many it takes. You know, the biggest mess we make always involves our relationships. If you don't want to be someone else's regret, be careful how you behave. But most of all, have a relationship with Jesus, who really, really, really is the right person for you. Remember, when it comes to Jesus, you really can't hide your lion eyes.